American African.
Okay.
Because we are not Americans, never have never been treated as such.
Yeah.
And the adjective precedes the noun. So when you say African American, you're describing a type of an American.
Okay.
We're not Americans. When you say American African, you're describing a type of an African. So that's why we say American African. American simply describes the African.
Yeah.
Versus African describing the American. We are Africans in an American context.
I hear you.
But when you say Black American, just to give you some clarity,
yeah,
it wasn't until recently that the United States government has reverted to referring to us as Black American. Since the 1980s, they referred to us as African American, which I don't agree with because I prefer American African. But they've started using Black American again instead of African American, which is a deliberate attempt to cut us off from our African consciousness.
Yeah.
And it is also a strategy to try to distract away from the current argument by your American African brothers and sisters for reparations and restitutions due to slavery.
Would you argue that Johnson was a slave name?
Absolutely.
And that other American Africans should drop theirs?
Ultimately, yes. The reason I pause when I ask that question is sometimes I think as African people, whether we're in America, Africa, the Caribbean, or throughout the diaspora, sometimes we focus too much on superficialities as opposed to substantive change. Yeah. So in other words, every African in the diaspora could drop our European names, take an African name, and we should. But is that the priority? No, freedom, justice, and liberation is the priority.
Yeah.
The Honorable Marcus Garvey never changed his name, but his contribution to African liberation is almost unparalleled.
100%.
John Henry Clark, Amos Wilson, a lot of our grandmaster teachers never changed their name, but they changed the condition of the people.
Yeah.
So I'm a big supporter of changing your name.
Yeah.
But I'm even a bigger supporter of changing the conditions. Do the work first, and the name will follow.
Are there currently institutions helping American Africans and other Africans in diaspora to go through the...
All right, guys, let me pause a little bit. Let me pause right there. Dr. Umar Johnson is an adamant, strong, perpetuous, adamant, supporter of Pan-Africanism. But again, you realize that his background tells you a lot. But again, one thing that got my attention was that he talks about the changing of the dynamics that the Western are using, referring to the Africans at large. At time, as you just put it, they were referred to the African Americans, and then now we've got Black Americans, and now that was mean, and then now we have got American Africans. But I don't know what exactly is going to turn out finally onto, but he has got something that really the dynamics. This is brain game, which is being perpetuated by the Western. But again, I do not have really to say too much because I might end up diluting this. We're going to watch together and then I'll come back at the end of it with more sentiments over this. Let's keep on watching.
American Africans and other Africans in diaspora to go through the rites of passage of letting go of their past life and being reborn as an Ifatunde, as an example, so that when the name changes, the substance has been changed as well?
Not really. We do have some institutions who are about that work, but the problem in the diaspora and in America is most of our organizations, even the so-called revolutionary or cultural ones, they're financed by the government or white philanthropy, which obviously for me as a Garveyite and a Pan-Africanist, that's a contradiction. Your enemy can never play a role in your liberation. There's a book that was written not too long ago. It's called The Revolution Will Not Be Financed. The book talks about why African people haven't made more progress in the modern era because we're still dependent on European capital to fund our initiatives and institutions. It needs to be all Black or it will never work for us. Your enemy will never finance your independence, but we are too greedy for white money to understand that reality.
A lot of South Africans have, whenever I speak about Dr. Umar, used to be Johnson, now Ifatunde. They raise something you raised on the Breakfast Club with DJ Envy, Angela Yee, and Charlemagne the God about South African schools teaching Mandarin. And they say you were misinformed and you are lying. I'd like you, if you may, to explain why you said that and what informed that.
Yes, indeed. I stand by what I said. The issue was I did not articulate the truth as effectively as I could have in that moment.
Yeah.
First of all, let's put it in context. When I go to the Breakfast Club, you have a limited amount of time.
Yeah.
So I have to get as much information as I can in that hour. And so what I said was Mandarin was required in South African schools. What I intended to say was the South African Ministry of Education has approved the instruction of Mandarin in South African schools.
Yeah.
It was a small glitch,
Yeah.
which was clarified. That interview was about 7-8 years ago. I've since clarified that 1,000,000 times. The issue wasn't that.
Yeah.
The issue is you have Negroes, whether they're in America or South Africa, who hate hearing the truth. The truth of the matter is Mandarin shouldn't be in your schools at all because this is not a Mandarin country. This is not Chinese. They're not teaching Chinese kids Zulu or Xhosa. So why are we teaching South African kids Mandarin?
Yeah.
But what you know about language instruction in school is what? Globally, language instruction follows the economic imperative of the nation.
100%.
The reason why Mandarin is being slowly introduced into South Africa schools is because the Chinese are slowly making headway into South African economy. Always follow the languages that they teach in school, and it shows you who's next up to be the economic oppressor.
Neocolonialism. Just to add context, it was in 2016, our Minister of Basic Education, Umar Motshekga, was saying that Mandarin was going to be introduced in over 500 schools in the country as a second additional language. At the time, we had 15 schools then. So I found myself questioning why so many people were frustrated by you saying that. And I think it was largely because of ignorance and not knowing what was going on.
Absolutely.
To the ordinary person out there and to the ordinary African out there, what is Pan-Africanism?
Pan-Africanism, if I was to sum it up in 3 basic principles. Number 1, all African people are one family. Whether you're in South Africa speaking Zulu or Xhosa, whether you're in Nigeria speaking Yoruba or Igbo, whether you're in Kenya speaking Maasai or Kikuyu, whether you're in Senegal speaking Wolof or Mandingo, whether you're in South Bronx speaking Ebonics or in Haiti speaking French or Brazil speaking Portuguese, we one family. And it doesn't matter what your religion is, whether you're Muslim or Christian or traditional African spiritualist, whether you pledge allegiance to this flag or that flag, whether you're light skin or dark skin, straight hair, nappy hair like mine, one family.
Yeah.
And we should identify on the level of our Africanity first. Being African is more important than anything else. Why? Because God made you an African. Everything else you belong to, you chose. You can leave Christianity tomorrow. You can leave Islam tomorrow. You can renounce your South African citizenship tomorrow. I could give up my American citizenship, so-called, tomorrow. You understand? I could never give up being an African. God made us African, and that's what we should identify with first.
Do you believe in the history and the science that man originated in Africa?
Oh, absolutely. It's indisputable. And it's interesting that you bring that up because right now in America, we have a ridiculous dialogue going on because there's some reactionary self-hating Africans who are trying to convince other American Africans that they don't come from Africa, that they were already in America. They're positing that America, the American continent, was a cradle of civilization. Mind you, no scientific research at all backs this theory up. Okay.
Even Europeans can't dispute.
It's indisputable. The Chinese just came out last month. One of the top geneticists in China who now stated that the first ancestor, their first ancestor in China was an African, and every Chinese carries the DNA. The East Indians have already done this. Mexicans have done it. So you mean to tell me the people in the diaspora who look the most like the African American, you have nothing to do with Africa genetically. It's ridiculous. But we have to look at the mentality behind that. Nobody wants to be on a losing team.
True.
And until African people start winning globally, nobody wants to be a part of us. This is why you have Spanish-speaking Africans in the Caribbean who will call themselves Latino or Hispanic. They're Africans, but who wants to be part of a losing team? It's just like when you go throughout Africa, it's not uh, I still run across Africans who will tell you I'm French, I'm British. You understand? Because nobody wants to be part of a losing team.
Yeah.
But the minute African people get our situation back in order, everybody who don't want to be black will proudly return to the race. We have to give them something to be proud of. The Honorable Marcus Garvey said, the white man has made being black a curse. I'm going to make being black a blessing. He said we have to sell being African back to the African.
If life originated in Africa and the original man, woman are from Africa, how do we explain Europeans, Asians, maybe even Latinos?
There's a great book written by probably the greatest archaeologist and cultural anthropologist in human history. Not black, but I would say he was the greatest of all time. I'm sure you know his name, Sheikh Anta Diop from Senegal. He wrote a book called The African Origin of Civilization. Everybody needs to read it. This was the scholar who snuck into, I don't want to say snuck, went into the temples of Kemet, took melanin, or should I say took pigment or skin off of the mummies of the pharaohs, came up with a melanin dosage test and proved that the kings and queens of Kemet had to be African based on the percentage of melanin in their skin. It was Sheikh Anta Diop who proved to the world that all 5 stages of modern man originated in Africa. The first stage of modern man, all African. Second stage, all African. Third, all African. Homo sapien, the 4th stage, all African. And then we're the 5th stage, Homo sapien sapien.
Yeah.
It was only the Homo sapien sapien who left Africa. If the Homo sapien sapien, modern African, never leaves Africa, we never go into Europe, we never experience the Ice Age, Europeans never come, they never evolve.
Yeah.
Asians never evolve. Indians never evolve. You don't get another race on earth if the African never leaves Africa. And for that reason, I would like to ask our great African ancestors, why in the hell did you leave the continent? Because if you didn't, we wouldn't be dealing with white supremacy.
Do you acknowledge white people, Europeans and Asians as Africans? And that
Absolutely
they should come back?
not. Absolutely not. They are not Africans. Even if they evolved from us, they are now a distinctly different race. Now, multiculturalists and integrationists and colorblind Negroes would say they have 2 arms and 2 legs and they have 2 eyes just like the rest of us. How are they not a part of our human family? And I'll tell you why. Biology is only one aspect of reality. What about spirituality? What about psychology? What about cosmology? What about sociology? Even though the white man may have all the body parts of an African, we do not share the same worldview. We do not share the same spiritual principles. We do not share the same sociological assimilation. Nothing about the African and the European is the same except the fact we share the same human body. So I do not agree that white people are Africans. They are Caucasians, and they have nothing to do with us.
So part of the argument is climate, the Ice Age. Part of it is diet, which may have affected pigmentation and those kind of things. Would you ever consider a journey? It may not be yours. It may be for our children, our children's children, to liberate and rescue Europeans and Asians and bring them back home.
That's a trap. We have to be careful because a lot of Africans around the world have taken on this responsibility of civilizing the Neanderthal. I'm not interested in civilizing the Neanderthal because the Neanderthal can't be civilized. Remember, we did this before. Did we not go into Europe and civilize Spain? Did we not go into Europe and civilize Italy? Did we not already go into Europe and take those backward European tribes and try to make them decent human beings? And what did Africa get for that? You got enslaved. What did Africa get for trying to civilize the white man? You got colonialism. What did Africa get for trying to teach the white man how to live as a decent human being? You got neocolonialism. Every time we try to introduce the white man to human civilization, we suffered. Stop trying to save the white man. Save yourself.
You're reminding me of some of the leaders of the Nation of Islam.
But we have differences.
I'd like to hear your thoughts on the Nation of Islam.
I respect the Nation of Islam. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has been one of the most consistent voices for Black consciousness in the United States.
Yeah.
He may be the longest running voice of consistent Black consciousness because he's been blessed to be with us in the flesh for so long. But there's differences. They operate on a religious paradigm. I do not operate on a religious paradigm. No religion is going to save Black people. No religion. Black people have to save Black people. I am a Pan-Africanist. They are not. I'm about the complete and total solidarity and liberation of all African people in the world. That is not their agenda. Although we are both nationalists and we probably have far more in common than we have differences, and I stand in solidarity with my brothers and sisters from the Nation of Islam. But the program of the Honorable Marcus Garvey is not the program of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad.
You've met some of our politicians in South Africa. We've got the ANC, the ruling party. We've got another Black leadership group coming up in the EFF. We as the masses of South Africa have accused a lot of our politicians of selling out and pushing for certain agendas. And I'd like to ask you what you believe the solution is for fellow Africans. Lots of melanin. They look like us. They sound like us, who are serving other agendas. What are we supposed to do with them? How do we unite with them? How do we work with them if we're saying Black first, Africans first?
Well, number one, I think African people globally, because we all suffer from this exploitation through the so-called democracy. We have to do a better job of choosing our leaders, number one. We do not do a good job as African people choosing our leaders. We largely allow them to select themselves. They anoint themselves and then they come before us. That's not the way it's supposed to be. We're supposed to select. We're supposed to do the research, the investigation, and decide who we want to represent us. You don't have somebody come and tell you they're going to represent you. That's totally backwards. That's number one. Number two, if we want African politicians, whether in America, whether in Africa, whether in the Caribbean, to be loyal to African people, we have to finance them. Any Black politician, I don't care how well-meaning they are, if they got to go to white people to get financing for their political party, if they got to go to white people to get financing for their campaign, ultimately they're going to carry out a white agenda because the hand that pays is the hand that rules. So if you want your politicians to be loyal to you in the Black community, you have to finance them. But we don't do that. In South Africa, many of your politicians are financed by white people. In America, our Black politicians are financed by white people. In the Caribbean, they're financed by white people. If you want to change that, if you want to stop being exploited by fake Black politicians, start selecting them yourself and start funding them yourself.
You agree that there are some bad Africans, some bad Black people?
Absolutely.
Are we supposed to try and unite with these people or try and save them?
I don't believe you can save every African, and I'm not interested in doing that. The freedom struggle is not a utopia. You saw that here. The South African freedom struggle wasn't a utopia. The Ghanaian freedom struggle wasn't a utopia. The Congolese freedom struggle wasn't a utopia. The American freedom struggle wasn't a utopia. There will always be reactive, anti-African elements, even amongst our own people. Cut off the cancer and grow with those who are interested in being free. The worst thing you can do is try to bring every South African into the fold in your next liberation struggle. Because truth be told, some of us have been so indoctrinated, so brainwashed by the white power structure that we will kill you before we kill apartheid.
Is this not potentially creating a new tribe of Pan-Africanist, Black conscious? I mean, you look at white Jewish, white British, we've got white Afrikaans. These are distinct groups. According to you, of course, they serve the same white supremacy agenda.
Absolutely.
Are we not, maybe the argument is, should we not be creating new Black tribes that share similar values and understand that we can't bring all Black people because the values are not the same?
Well, firstly, I hate the use of the word tribe. Believe it or not, that's a word that was introduced by the Caucasian to basically try to reference African people as being primitive. I prefer kingdom, not the Zulu tribe, but the Zulu people or the Zulu kingdom, not the Xhosa tribe, but the Xhosa people or the Xhosa kingdom. I don't think we need a new group. I just think we need to find the people who are ready for liberation. As far as I'm concerned, there's only one quote unquote tribe, and that's the Pan-African tribe. Those of us who recognize that our Africanity is greater than our cultural differences, greater than our religious differences, greater than our ideological or social political differences. It this Pan-Africanism that is what's going to solve the problems of African people, nothing else. So any brother on the African continent who sees me as his brother and doesn't exercise any type of prejudice towards me because I'm coming from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the USA, he's a Pan-Africanist. We can work together.
Yeah.
I will unite with any Pan-Africanist anywhere, and I will unite with absolutely no tribalist anywhere.
You say the name is not as important.
Right, guys, you've heard it all, that particular point. Now, Dr. Umar Johnson is trying to put it very clear that it's not a tribe, it's the kingdom per se, even as the Caucasians, they tried to put it. It is of essence that all these things that, all these particular coming, rising up, groupings, that they have that particular stage, so it doesn't end up being just a talk in media platforms like in this one here. So it is my, of course, opinion. I, as always, stand to corrected. Do drop me your comments on the comment section. Let me know what you think, as far as the Pan-Africanism and the African consciousness rising is concerned. And until we meet in the next episode, cheers.